All right, I'm talking with Steve Cleere from Next Level Brands and the Next Level Brands podcast. And so, Steve, tell me, you had been thinking about starting a podcast for a while. Why were you thinking of starting a podcast? What was your thinking behind that?
Well, it was kind of a combination of a couple of things, John. One was I'd been listening to several different podcasts within the industry that I really enjoyed, and felt that made it a good medium for actually getting information and stuff out there, and also allowing a person to focus a little bit. So whether you're watching with a video or whether you're listening audio while you're commuting or whatever, you can pay attention. And I had previously done a number of blogs and newsletters, and to communicate on a regular basis, and oftentimes would talk to people in the industry and do quotes, not formal interviews,
Right.
but quotes.
And how does doing the podcast compare to writing blog posts and things of that nature?
Well, it's much more exciting to start with, because you're not sitting down and going through a bunch of, I go through notes to prepare when I interview somebody, but I don't script everything out. It's obviously it's a back and forth, and the personality of the people that I'm interviewing, or topic research that I'm doing is very exciting. It's different because it all has to come together, quote unquote, live, even though they are recorded. Why
did you decide to work with us?
Well, of course, I'd been following you guys and listening to Jeremy's podcast for a while. And
Jeremy's, not John's.
John's as well. But I've been listening to Jeremy's, both of you guys.
Okay.
And, I thought, my initial impression was, I could probably do this, except for. And the except for was basically time, number one, and number two, expertise to actually, I come from the old days when you had reel-to-reel tapes and you edited by cutting the tape. And what you and I had talked about, of course, was that so much of that is something that Rise25 takes care of, and indeed they have, that it made it a lot easier than my original conception was.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely our goal, is to get those things off your plate so you can focus on the highest and best use of your time. So how was the onboarding process after you signed up?
So the onboarding process was really, pretty straightforward. I'm Mac based. That may make it easier because of everything, but we were able to connect with all of the outside supply stuff that we needed to do. Getting equipment was no problem, and then your crew took on the back end, got everything hooked up. I was actually the slowest part of the wheel at that point, because it took me a little while to get to some of the people I wanted to start off with. I called them my softballs. So I was trying to get through to softballs, clients I've worked with in the past, good old buddies, whatever, but knowledgeable people in the industry, because I didn't want to start off the first one cold.
Sure.
And so, right. And so we were able to line that up and eventually got started. And then as soon as I got started, I was really able to actually produce quite a few. And now I think I'm going out, a month and a half or whatever at this point.
Excellent. Excellent. What has been like reconnecting with old clients, old referral partners, people that you've known for a while, but you haven't had, don't always keep in touch, or at least on a regular basis?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that the podcast is a great excuse to get back in touch. And most people have something they're working on that they would like to talk about. So it's, and in our business, in food and CPG, it can be a new product. It can be a mission of some kind that they're on, or something within the industry if they're trying to change, whether it's eco-friendly packaging or gluten-free breads, whatever it is, there's always something that somebody wants to talk about. So that made it pretty easy to get that connection. Where I was really anticipating there was going to be more of a challenge was reaching out to new people, people that I was aware of, but thought, oh, wow, why would they want to talk to me? And if they do talk to me, do they think I'm trying to sell them something? And then they aren't going to want to talk to me. And so that next step was a little bit more trepidatious.
And how has that gone with interviewing new people?
It's gone very smoothly. So my own experience was I started out with, again, the softballs, which is people that I knew would respond to me in one way or the other. When I got a few of those lined up, then I reached out within my email lists to some people that I would not only like to talk to, but in many cases would like to work with.
Yeah.
And I did the emails and it was crickets. I got nothing, zero, nada. So I sat back, I said, that's strange. Okay. But I understand, you get an email and he said, I want you to be on my podcast. You don't react to it. So I actually went back to LinkedIn because all the people were LinkedIn connections of mine as well. And I messaged them through LinkedIn with a much shorter, much more succinct, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. By the way, I have a podcast, and I got a 30% success rate immediately.
Wow. That's great.
That's maintained. So now I just do a few a week because I know I'm going to get 2 or 3 yeses, and I only have so much time to actually do the recording.
Yeah. And I believe we've brought some introductions to you as well.
Yeah. And you guys have also brought some people that either you were interviewing or people that you've talked to recommended those people, and they fell, into my bailiwick. And so it was really easy then to make that connection, from you. And I actually have done 2, I think, recently, one from Jeremy and one from you, where, it was just an introduction, and you guys thought they would be great on my podcast. I agreed with you, and they were very, willing to do it. So,
great.
Yeah.
And then how does the conversation, lend itself to a discussion around possible synergy, possibly working together? How do you make that transition into having that conversation?
So I'm pretty light on the solicitation part of it. Basically I explain a little bit to them about my background and what I do, and then talk about the positioning for the questions or the areas that I would like to explore, and then allow them to say where they would like to talk about it, or they have something they want to bring up. And then by nature, so to give you an example, by nature of the way the conversation flows, is one of the questions you talk about, how did you get to where you are, and then it's where do you want to go next? And that's really where, I have, someone explaining to me, well, my 5-year plan is to put my product into conventional retail. Well, guess what? That's what I do for a living, is help people put products into conventional retail. So that immediately opens it up. And specifically, I've had a case recently where that conversation occurred. She explained to me exactly what her overall plan, 33,000 foot plan, was for the company going forward. And we closed off the interview. She said, I'd like to pick your brain about something. Well, if you're a consultant, that's an incredible buying signal when somebody wants to talk to you about something.
Yep.
And I, of course, said, sure, anytime, we can set it up, whatever. And she said, no, what I'd like to do is call you back on my cell phone right now, because I have a meeting coming up with a large distributor, and I have some questions I'd like to get answers on. And I went, sure. So now we've changed from I'm trying to solicit you to your business to I'm now one of your advisors, and we've done a podcast together, and I know what your plans are. You know what my background is, but none of it has been under the guise of anybody soliciting business or having to worry about any of that. It's like new friendship, and we are going to continue that dialogue. And there are several of those dialogues going on right now with people to whom I would be very honored to work with going forward. That's
great. And that's one of the wonderful things about it, is you can just target the types of people that you admire, people whose businesses you admire, who you'd love to work with. You're giving to them, you're giving them exposure. So they're appreciative of that. Any other tips or advice that you would give to someone who's considering starting a podcast, maybe sitting on the sidelines? Maybe they're thinking, oh, it's time consuming, or I'll do it at some point in the future when all my ducks are lined up in a row.
No, I think that basically if you're the type of person who doesn't mind talking to people, and and again, it's the thing of holding conversations, and you don't feel stilted in holding conversations, it's a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful business development tool for referrals, probably for actually getting, signed customers, if that's what you're up to. But it puts you in a different position. It puts you, first of all, you're coming to them with something that you're offering to help them promote their product or their mission or whatever they're doing. as opposed to you trying to sell them. You don't need to say, oh yeah, I have 25 years experience. I have this, I have that. That's all going to come out in the conversation about the podcast. What's your background? Where'd you come from? And then you learn so much from the interview itself that you didn't know about the company or the person beforehand, that all of a sudden you can realize that, there was a personal story behind this entrepreneurship. It was not started because, the person really liked these candy bars. It was started because they were a diabetic and they had to literally invent something that would satisfy their sweet tooth and they could eat. It's that kind of a thing. And you can't get that from a sales call, no matter what you do. Timing wise, I mentioned that was a concern when originally, and I thought, wow, how much time is this going to take and stuff? And, I think the first few that I did maybe took longer than they should have. So my podcasts tend to run 30 to 45 minutes. So I book an hour, just book the person and say, look, I'm going to talk to you beforehand, then we're going to start recording, and then we'll talk at the end. Book an hour. And I've had people who've talked to me for a half an hour after the recording was over.
Right. Which you're happy to do, probably, because this is someone you've selected anyways. As someone,
this person wouldn't probably have taken my cold phone call,
right.
But now all of a sudden, we'll talk. And I think the time commitment is one of, I'm debating too as to, I could do some shorter versions, but really about 30 minutes. It really, if you're talking to an entrepreneur to go through kind of what their background is, what their product is, and then where they're going, you're pretty much through 30 minutes pretty quick.
Yeah.
So again, for me, that doesn't seem like a lot of time commitment, because if I was, in the old days, if I was on the phone trying to cold call these people,
that's time consuming as well.
Hours and hours. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The other great thing about podcasting for me is the creation of the network. Because when I talk to some people, so I've had a podcast where a person said to me, by the way, there's these two guys that are doing this great thing in San Francisco, and you need to talk to them. And it's like, oh, okay, well, give me, I'll shoot you his email. I'll let them know that you're going to call. Bam. That results in those two guys being on my podcast. And again, that's invaluable.
I firmly believe as long as you delegate all the pieces of show notes and audio editing, all that kind of stuff that you really shouldn't be focusing on, as long as you delegate those pieces, I believe having a podcast is less time consuming than not having a podcast, because of all the other energy and stuff. Yeah, how hard it is to connect with high caliber people without a podcast.
Yeah, and the Rise25 crew has been great with scheduling, with the notes, all the stuff. I just changed something around this morning, but it's taken care of, because that's all there. And then the reference, it's posted on my website, so that's not an issue. I don't have to worry about it. I have my mailings pre-scheduled for each of the guests that are coming up, and it's rolled very smoothly.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. Next Level Brands podcast. Give everyone the website so people can go check it out.
So it's www.nextlevel brands.com.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much, Steve.
You bet. Talk to you later, John.